Questions, questions, questions. Today we are devoting the podcast to your questions.
You are listening to Wealth Talks with the McPhees. You may have heard us mention a few weeks ago on the podcast to send in your questions, and we also sent out an email a few weeks ago. Thank you to those of you who sent in your questions. Today, we're going to be talking about these. The first question, are there policies that you sell for investment purposes that capitalize immediately? Perhaps policies made in one lump sum.
Well, let's break that question down. First of all, life insurance is not an investment. So we don't sell life insurance policies for investments. Life insurance is an asset purchase. It's guaranteed. It's a contract. And there's certain things that are going to take place in that contract based on how the contract is written. And that's why we use participating whole life contracts, because you get to participate in the profits the company does through their investments while your returns are guaranteed. Mm-hmm. And those returns aren't expressed in a percentage rate like most investments are. They're presented in the form of an illustration that says in such and such a year, if you've paid the guaranteed premiums that you promised to pay, then you will have a guaranteed value in that policy that if you canceled it, you would get, and if you don't cancel it, you could borrow against.
Yeah. And you know, the guarantees that we get in life insurance and certain banking products is something that doesn't happen with any other type of investment, if you want to call it that. Technically, they're not even investments. They're guaranteed banking and insurance products.
That's exactly right. And so are there policies we sell for investment purpose that capitalize immediately? Now, the capitalize immediately, yes. We do have policies called single premium policies that you can pay one premium, and all the insurance in that policy is what is called paid up or paid off. You never pay another dime for insurance. And that's really what's happening in a traditional whole life policy too, is the base insurance gets converted to paid up insurance. That's where the cash value comes from. It's your equity that's producing that, your paid up insurance in that policy. And that's why the premium can stay the same on a traditional whole life policy without having to be increased over time, is that the base insurance gets converted over the lifetime of the contract. So there's less and less base insurance premium that you have to be paying on each time. And so if we want to do a single premium policy, we can put all the money up front in a policy, never pay another dime on it, but now we run into the IRS, who's always interested in how we do our dealings with money. And they say if you do that, then the policy's growth, which is going to come from dividends over a single premium policy over the life of the contract, then those dividends are going to become a taxable event for you. And if you ever pull out money that represents the growth out of that policy, then you'll pay taxes on it. And they force you to take out the growth first because it was a single premium policy.
Yeah, so it is tax different when it's a single premium policy. And reading between the lines here on this question, perhaps that's what you're thinking when you're saying investment purposes. Maybe not that the policy itself is for investment purposes, but would you have a high cash value to be able to take money out for investment purposes on the side? Is that a reason to buy a single premium life insurance policy?
Well, again, we have to break it down logically and not speculatively. So we have to look at this logically. If I buy more rented insurance in a whole life policy by adding a rider to it so that I can get a higher death benefit and pay and get a higher cash value because of that, then I'm violating what Nelson Nash said in his book and how to design these policies. We want the lowest death benefit with the highest premium that's comfortable and affordable to the policyholder to generate the highest cash value based on those parameters. So if I artificially go in as an agent and tweak the policy to put more base insurance into it, a higher term policy, a rider, as they call it.
Okay.
Now I've tweaked the IRS formula to be able to squeeze in a little bit more money into the paid up insurance portion of it. But I run a risk here because, number one, if I can't afford that premium for 7 years in a row, that policy could become a mech and I could have a tax liability on my hand. Number two, adding that extra term could prohibit me from adding an extra whole life policy later on because I've extended my human life value out in one policy and I can't buy the other one and maybe capital's available over the next 7 years. Or number three, and this is, I think, is the most critical one, is that term insurance actually draws down the conversion of base insurance to cash value over the course of the policy. So if we want to look at a long-term internal rate of return, it goes down when we add a term policy at the front. So in my opinion, if you've got a great investment and you're going to tie that money up in life insurance first by adding a term rider to it so you can get milk just a little bit more money out of the whole life policy to invest with, just go make the investment first. If it's that good of an investment, you'll be able to take the returns off the investment and buy the whole life that's guaranteed without having to mess with all these little tweakings of the IRS code.
There you go. And you won't have the interest expense.
And you'll have a higher internal rate of return over the life of your policy.
And so that's why, often will make sense to start a smaller whole life policy at first, and then add to it with the with increased income that happens in other areas of your life.
So I know that's a long explained answer, but the truth of the matter is we have to look at every logical angle of it. We just can't say, oh, well, this policy has a whole lot more cash value, so it's better. No, cash value only represents the paid up insurance we own. And if we have to trick the IRS code by adding a term rider to that to elevate the death benefit, now we're paying for that death benefit that we're probably never going to benefit from.
There is a cost to it. Absolutely. Question number 2, when is it best to use a policy loan to pay off another debt? This question was asked by a client who understands the answer to this now, but says, I wish I would have understood this better sooner in the process.
Well, this has, again, we've got to look at the math behind it. Let's say that we have an interest rate that is equal to a policy loan's interest rate. Does it really make sense to take a policy loan to pay off that loan?
So like a car loan at 1%, does it make sense to take a policy loan at 5% to pay it off?
Right.
I'm thinking no.
That's not the best use of your capital because if someone's going to give you money at 1%, that's almost giving it away. Mm-hmm. And Warren Buffett was taught by his father at age 11, it's reported, that the best way to build equity in life is to use other people's money. Well, it doesn't make any difference whether you're using the insurance company's money or the bank's money or the auto dealership's money. If they're going to loan it to you at 1%, that's a very, very low cost of using other people's money. And if you will be able to keep earning a higher return, a growth rate in your policy than what you're paying somebody else, it makes no sense to take a policy loan.
Yeah. So now it makes, even if it doesn't make sense to take the policy loan, it still makes sense to have the reserve of the policy values growing for you.
Oh, absolutely.
While you use that money at a lower rate.
That's exactly right.
And that's a key. That's a key point here. The value in the life insurance in this situation comes in because of the reserve qualities.
It does. Now, let's take another example. Let's say that you're going to go into debt to start a new business or maybe an investment that you're not going to see a rate of return on for maybe 5, 6, 7 years. Mm-hmm. Does it make sense to take a policy loan and just pay the interest on it because they are interest-only loans? You're not required to pay the principal back until your business or investment takes off, and now you can pay a lump sum
to pay the
policy loan. And now we're talking about the internal growth of the policy again.
And it could make sense to do that. It depends on the time frame and how certain you are that money is going to be there to pay off the policy loan when you get there.
I was just working with someone the other day that wanted to take a $10,000 loan for over a course of 9 years to make this business venture. And they were willing to pay the $500 of interest every year for the first 9 years, knowing that in year 10, they could pay the principal off at the beginning of the year for $10,000. That means they only paid $4,500 for the use of that $10,000 over the course of their years. But in the policy that they had cash value growth minus the cost of the premiums of $25,000. That makes total sense.
Sure.
Because they had more growth in the policy than what the interest cost them.
And they bought their insurance at a younger age, and so they're going to have more long-term growth from that once they do pay off the policy loan as well.
Yes.
Very good. So that answers the question, when is it best to use a policy loan to pay off another debt? Next question, can a person who is single with no children and who does not own a business purchase life insurance?
Absolutely, yes. There is no requirement to be married. There's no requirement to have children. Life insurance is a replacement of income as far as the insurance company is considered. So they are looking at what you make, what your net worth is, and how long your life expectancy is. And that has to do with health and some other things and occupation. But there's no restrictions on being married or having kids. So it's based on those other factors.
And some people say, well, you don't necessarily need life insurance, if you don't have a family, if you don't have business partners that you need to protect. But I'm single. I don't have children yet, and I still want that protection for when I do.
Well, and that's because probably because I had life insurance on my life before I was married too, John, because life insurance is something that replaces our income. Not that we can replace the value that we would have been in society had we not been here with money, but there's no reason why we should not buy insurance on our life being single, because we're here to make this world a better place. And being able to pass on that legacy either to a charity, nonprofit, or loved ones, whether they be family, friends, or just acquaintances, is a huge value. And that's been overlooked and kind of mocked in our society. But that's really what we're here for, is to make the world a better place.
Totally. Next question. Do I have to live in Nevada to have your help setting up a whole life policy? And there's another question that goes with this, but a little wider scope. Can a non-American get whole life insurance from you? And what are the requirements, if so?
Well, let's take the Nevada question first, because that's one reason we are licensed in all 50 states. We want to be able to reach out and help people, and we do. We have clients in, I think, 48 of the 50 states right now, but we are licensed in all 50 states, and we can help you regardless of where you are in the United States. Second, can a non-American buy life insurance? Well, in Canada, if you're a Canadian citizen, Canada has life insurance similar to the life insurance sold in the United States, and you can buy life insurance through a licensed Canadian agent there. If you are living in the United States and are Canadian, and you have a bank account and you have a job here in the United States, or you own property or a business in the United States, we can also help you. And that holds true for almost every country in the world, except those that are listed on the State Department's no business dealings with this country.
Yeah.
So
or if
we just have
live
to
in a risky country or something like that, then they're not going to want to take that risk.
Yeah. So if you own a business, you have a Social Security number, you have a green card, you're here in the United States on a visa, you have a bank account. Now the insurance company has to be marketed and sold to people that are in the United States territories. We can't go marketing in Europe or India or China.
Right.
But if those citizens of those countries are within the United States doing business here and meet the prerequisites of having insurance, like we mentioned, a bank account, a job, a business, a home, then there is no reason that they can't apply and receive a life insurance policy.
Very good. So next question. This person writes in, it says, my question relates to using a dividend-paying whole life policy to pay monthly expenses, not debt. Monthly expenses such as electric, water, cable internet, credit cards that are paid off each month. is there a way to profit from using the policy? I can't see one, but I'm curious. And then he goes on, he says, I already have money to pay these monthly expenses. If I create the loan, is there a benefit in using the money I would have paid? I would have been paying to the monthly expenses listed, instead put that money into the paid up additions rider of a policy.
I think this question goes back to something I asked Nelson Nash years ago when we were first understanding what it meant to use life insurance. And he said, Tom, is your money worth just as much as anybody else's money? And I thought my money was worth more because when I lose it, I have to go back and work for it.
Okay.
But his answer to me was, then why aren't you paying yourself the interest on your own money that you would pay somebody else? So let's just take this example. Let's say that you pay a lot of your monthly expenses with a credit card. That certainly wasn't what Michelle and I did when we started out. We were all cash. So we were losing 100% of the growth on our money that we could have earned by paying cash for all of our bills. Mm-hmm. But it didn't take us long to realize that there are credit cards out there that give you points back. Mm-hmm. And so using a credit card to pay our bills makes a lot of sense because that's like getting a cash discount. We just have to wait for the refund at the end of the year from the credit card company or the points. Mm-hmm. Now, it becomes pretty much impossible to finance that credit card payment every month with a policy loan.
You can do it for short periods.
You could do it for a short period of time, but what's going to happen is it's going to happen just like with a credit card. If you did that and didn't pay the credit card off, pretty soon the interest rate is going to be, or not the interest rate, but the interest owed, the volume of interest is going to kill you. However, for short periods of time, maybe once every quarter, that you do that and have a determined time when you're going to pay it off and then set up frequencies and map that out. Yes, indeed. In fact, that is one of the things that we first started doing. Michelle is the one that taught me that. She says, why aren't we taking a policy loan to pay off our credit card bill? Now we're earning the points the credit card company gave us, but we're not paying the credit card company any interest. And we're just going to divert the interest that the credit card would have charged us back into our money management system. And like we said, you can do that for short spurts, short durations, and it helps you save an extra little bit of money without really feeling the pain of it. That's the whole idea behind the credit card in the first place. Have this nice, shiny new object and only pay $30 a month for it for the next 130 weeks, you know?
Right. And that's a cash flow thing that you can certainly leverage to help you over time. And I think the key here is, we see the expenses. That's the seen here. But what's the unseen is what's happening with the money that you have available to pay these monthly expenses. What is it doing while it's waiting to pay these monthly expenses? And how long is it sitting around before it does?
Exactly. And we talk about this in the Perpetual Wealth Code, the video that we published, of doing this exact same thing. It's a system that helps create a product that otherwise wouldn't be there for you. Mm-hmm. For example, every well-run business, every well-run organization has a system of things to go through. As a pilot, we have a system that we have to check off before we start the airplane, a system that we go through at the end of the runway before we pull onto the runway to take off, a system that we check before we land so that the brakes, the seatbelts, and everything are functioning so we don't crash the plane. Those systems are put in effect because they're effective. Not that someone couldn't come up with a different system that was maybe just as effective, but if you ditch the system and leave one of the steps out, you're endangering yourself. And creating wealth is a system. And the Perpetual Wealth Code that we talk about is a system. It's not the only system to create wealth, but it's a system that is guaranteed to do it if you follow it.
A framework.
And so, using monthly expenses, this month's expenses, let's take and finance that with a policy loan. Mm-hmm. and let's pay this policy loan over the next 2 years. And maybe we'll be able to have enough cash flow in 6 months to do that again. But can I do it every month back to back to back to back?
It's probably not going to be productive for you to do that.
Probably not.
Right.
Otherwise, I'd be financially independent right now and wouldn't need the life insurance.
There you go. So although financially independent people certainly use life insurance, they'll often use it for different reasons to perpetuate and extend their wealth.
Estate planning and legacy. Mm-hmm.
So what about the money that's sitting around waiting to pay these monthly expenses? Are you keeping $20,000 just sitting around waiting to pay monthly expenses? Is it sitting around for 3 months before it actually pays those expenses? Now we can start to exploit the time factor that's involved in that. So money like that you're setting aside throughout the year to pay taxes at the end of the year. Certainly makes sense to put that in a policy, take a policy loan, pay the taxes, pay that back over the course of the following year. Things like that where you have a little bit longer recovery time cycle, that makes a whole lot more sense than trying to just to finance monthly expenses. Monthly expenses can be financed in the same way, but like we were just saying, it's not necessarily a sustainable way to create long-term wealth.
And this goes back to the very essence of becoming your own banker that Nelson Nash talked about. He talks about the 1993 article that Sean Tully wrote in Fortune magazine called The Real Key to Creating Wealth.
Yes.
It's called Economic Value Added. And all Sean Tully was doing was telling people, hey, your money has a cost to it. If you're going to spend it on bills, on assets, on equipment, on build out, you've got to take in consideration what the cost of your money is. And if you don't, you're losing money.
Absolutely.
And that's all the infinite banking concept is about, is making sure that we're keeping track of the cost of capital and making sure that that cost of capital comes back to us more frequently than it goes to somebody else.
Yes. 2 resources come to mind here around this. We just did a show about Sean Tully and the real key to creating wealth. I'll put a link to that show in the notes for this one, so you can listen to that podcast. Also, the infinite banking concept ebook that we wrote. It's on our website. It's called Understanding the Infinite Banking Concept. Pages 20 through 22 in that ebook deal with the frequency of how often are you financing things. So like monthly expenses. In this case, we used a vacation. We financed a vacation once, and then we also financed one every 2 years, and we compared the results. And you can see the comparison between that and how it is effective to get the money working for you long term. But the more and more often you use it, the more and more benefit you need to be creating outside of that system.
That's so true. And, talking about the monthly expenses are no different than expenses that happen for major asset purchases. Let's say your refrigerator goes out. We just had an air conditioner go out. So, bam, there's another, several $1,000s that we weren't expecting. That's a major purchase.
Sure.
But if we accumulate monthly expenses over a period of time, they can become a major expense too.
They can.
And we can group that together and say, okay, we're going to finance this.
Certainly.
Just like we finance a car, just like we finance a washer and dryer, just like we finance a refrigerator, an air conditioner, or anything else. So it's just a mindset. It doesn't matter what the expense is. You group it. You put your system together. If you need help, we're here to help you do that.
Absolutely. And many people err on the side of not getting enough life insurance.
Yes.
And so they say, well, I have all these expenses that I need to do. I don't want to have to take a policy loan, so I'm not going to fund the policy. I'm going to fund a really tiny one to start with. And then a few years down the road, they wish they had started a little bit larger, because now they have the money that they could have paid back those policy loans, and they would have had something that was growing for them better. So make sure you're not erring on the side of not getting enough life insurance, but don't get too much that it's going to be a burden with the loan interest either. And that's the balance. There is a little bit of art to selecting the right size of policy. Next question. My biggest curiosity is about self-financing business expenses through whole life. Is there a certain policy maturation that should be met before doing this? In other words, how old should your policy be before you try to start finance some business expenses?
Well, there's a couple of illustrations and statements in Nelson Nash's book, Becoming Your Own Banker. One says that if you would finance the capitalization of a policy for 7 years and then allow the dividends to continue to pay that policy from there on, is a good time. The other one shows financing a policy for 4 years and then taking a policy loan out. And here's the key. When Nelson wrote his book, dividends were higher than they are today because profits of the insurance companies were higher because of the interest rates. We've been in a low interest rate since 2000, 2001. So the dividends have not been what they were when Nelson wrote his book. So financing a policy just for 7 years and expecting the dividends to pay the premiums after that is unrealistic today.
It is.
Does that mean that we shouldn't take a policy loan from a policy until year 7? That's what I thought when we first started the infinite banking concept in our life. But the truth of the matter is if we take a look at the compound annual growth rate over a period of time, it's going to remain what it is at year 15, regardless of whether we take a policy loan out in year 1 or not. Or if we take a loan out in year 2 or 3 or 5 or 6. The key is we've got guarantees in the policy. The cash value there is guaranteed based on the equity that you have in that policy. The equity you have in that policy is paid up insurance. Insurance that you've paid one premium on will never pay a premium on again. So using that money to purchase anything that you would normally lose interest to somebody else in makes sense, whether it's a business expense or a personal expense. And so there is no set figure unless you're trying to meet a certain objective and say, I want to finance this piece of equipment in 3 years and I know it's going to cost me $40,000. You obviously can't finance $40,000 in a policy that only has 10 in year 1.
Yes.
However, you could use that 10 to help finance the $40,000 and only have to borrow 30 from somebody else.
There you go. So you can use it to a certain extent.
You can use it, or you could use it to finance minor expenses so that it allows you to free up your cash flow so that you're not having to put so much on credit with someone else, like the interest-only loan that we had earlier that we talked about. So if we borrowed $10,000 today to cover just some operating expenses in the business and only paid the interest on those until the policy actually built up, it's $40,000. And that freed up the cash flow that we would normally have to be spending on expenses. That helps us get to the $40,000 mark quicker.
Certainly.
Whether it's in our policy or just our savings account at that point.
Yeah. So a couple of things that are coming to mind on this is, one, we don't need to we don't need to make sure that everything gets into the policy before we can take a loan out against it. It's kind of like asking, well, should I start a business and not take any money out of it until it's established in 10 years? Well, if that's the type of business model that you're shooting for, maybe. But if it's not, then there's no hard fast rule that says that you cannot take money out of a business for 10 years.
That's correct.
So it depends on the situation, totally. And then the second consideration is, how much do you want in reserve before you finance business ideas? Because business investments, loans to a business or business expenses, can be more risky than financing personal expenses where you might have a little better idea of cash flow. So how much do you want to keep in reserve?
This is why we talk about things being comfortable and affordable. This is a comfort question. This is a subjective question. It has no objectivity at all in me being able to tell anybody how much they need to have in reserve for their comfort level.
Totally.
I don't know anyone's expenses until we talk to them. We can make suggestions on that, but we cannot be telling people, have X amount of money. And we see this all the time. Have 3 months in reserve. Well, how do you know you're not going to be needing medical attention that's going to wipe out that reserves in the first day in the hospital?
Yeah, and some people need 2 years to feel comfortable.
Yeah, and so this is a comfort zone question, and the truth of the matter is nobody knows the future.
That's right.
We don't know, and so that's why the life benefit formula has that faith concept to it. What do we believe the future is going to hold? And everybody's faith measurement is a little bit different.
It is, and circumstances are different. They always will be.
So this is the faith component of that.
That's right. So we have 5 more questions, but we're running out of time on today's show. So I think we should push these to next week, or maybe we have a special interview coming up too. So maybe we'll push this out a couple of weeks. Thank you for all of you who sent in your questions. Another opportunity to get more questions answered, in addition to the podcast show coming out here in a couple of weeks, is to attend our live event coming up September 17th and 18th here in Las Vegas. It's on building sustainable wealth and some tax planning concepts as well. We'll be talking about being debt-free. You know, a lot of people get debt-free, but what comes next? Things about strategies about funding retirement, or things that you would want to know about before you start investing. So those are some of the topics that we're going to be covering at the seminar here in Las Vegas. You can register on our website, life-benefits.com, or give us a call here at 702-660-7000, and we'll look forward to seeing you here in Las Vegas. Any last thoughts on the show today?
I just want to thank each of you for sending in your questions. These are important. It's the questions that we have heard and listened to and addressed and found answers for over the course of our working with clients that has helped us become experts. Because they say that the question that is asked, there's probably at least 10 other people that are having the same thought or same question. So thank you for coming out and sharing those questions. And we really look forward to working with people one-on-one, because some of these questions were generalized today, but each of these questions can have a special interpretation on an individual basis.
It can.
As you say, John, so often, you can't put everything on a spreadsheet. We can't put every person in a little box and compartmentalize them. So if you have questions, you can certainly send them in to the podcast here. We'll address them on the air. But then if you need individualized answers to those questions that are a little bit more pertinent to your situation, don't hesitate to give us a call, 702-660-7000. We are here to help you keep more of the money you make.
That's right. So many experts today have their heads stuck in the ivory tower up in the clouds. And the questions that we get from you and the one-on-one experience, not only does it help us to help you, but it also helps us to be the right kind of expert with real life experience and what people are actually doing. And so thank you for sending in your questions. You can send in questions for the next show that we have coming up. Send them to john@wealthtalks.com. Have a great week, and we'll be back next week.